Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Crystal Hall. I'm with the Iowa After School Alliance. I'm glad that you are on this call today. We have a great presentation for you today. So I'm sure that if you are with a school district, you are very familiar with the whole Return to Learn plan. If you are a community partner, I'm sure you've heard of this Return to Learn plan. Which is for the typical school day work that's going to be re-engaging with people in the fall. We have decided to also think about what this means for out-of-school time programming. And through a series of other committee calls and discussions, we found out that Kathy Gerst with Burlington has put together a fantastic plan for her site, and we thought this could be something that could be fairly easily replicated across the board. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. She's going to start the presentation, and I do also want to let you know that she has also developed some templates that we will make available to you who are participating on this call today, and that will also be available through the entire network then too. That way it will help you as you're thinking about what this means when kids get back in the classrooms and then when they're coming to you before and after school. So at this point, I would also say feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions.
Get her COVID test.
Oh, and again, if you have not muted yourself, please do so. I can mute you as well, but if you would be so kind as to mute yourself, that would be great. So we'll turn it over to Kathy. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. Good morning. Can everybody see the Return to Learn PowerPoint on your screens? Yeah, like a thumbs up or something. Okay, thank you. And really, I can see Billy and Crystal in my little view, so I'm going to rely on your emotions and your facial expressions and how we're doing. So good morning, everybody. I will be talking to you today, and then we will also have, there we go, Corey Johnson, who is the Burlington Community School District's Director of Curriculum, join us today. I'm going to text him when it's almost his turn because he's on another meeting at this point. As you can imagine, I think most administrations and administrators in school settings are in multiple meetings all the time. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But today, it's going to be fun. It's going to be, I have fun little things in there for you. And so the first thing that we're going to do is take a poll so that we see who is on the call with us. So can you all see the poll that just launched? All right, I can see we're getting some responses. So while we wait for everybody to vote, can you all hear that? All right, because I know this is what we really want when we come back to school. We want to welcome everybody and say, come on in. We're waiting for 2 people to vote in. All right, we got 1 left. And this is just so that we can see who was on the call as I go through and ask some questions. So we've got a couple let's see if I end this poll, share results. Do you now see the results on your screen? Fantastic. So we have a couple multi-site directors, a site director, a couple grant directors, and a bunch of other. So I hope that our others are going to enjoy this call as well. I have one more poll for you because I would really like to get to know how you feel about coming back and what kind of mood that you're in based on your preparedness. So are you 100% ready to go? Are you kind of getting there? You haven't started because you're waiting for other people, or you're like, help, I don't know what to do next. Because it changes every day. Got just a couple more people. One more. But there, 100%. Thank you. Okay. So, looks like the majority not quite started, or you're getting there, and we've got to help. So my goal today is to really help you, to show you what we did and how we're going to respond to various scenarios, as well as how I gathered this task force and we kind of made these ideas. So I'm hoping by the end of today, if I were to take that poll, you might still be getting there, not there, but at least you'll have some idea on where you are. So I've got to stop the poll. Oh, I cannot see it. Okay, one moment, please, while I deal with the technical issues. Okay, there we go. Okay, so oops. So I have one more thing for you, and that is to gauge you as well. So take out your mobile phones, or you can do this on a website as well. And you can, if you text Cassie Gerst 185 to this number 37607, and then it will ask you, I think it'll ask you to join from my poll, or you can go to this website, pollev.com, and enter Cassie Gerst 185. I'm going to leave that up for a minute. So you can join by text or you can join by web, whichever you prefer. Okay. So here's the question for you all. How are you feeling about your plans to return? So you use one word, and when you use that one word, there can't be spaces between the words if you use two. If you want to use two words, you just have to. If you use two words, no space in between. We're getting some responses. You can type in as many as you want. We've got a lot of anxious. So the more, it's a word cloud. So the more that people type in certain words, the more they come up. So anxious is looking really, really big. Yikes, I love that. Confused, stressed, absolutely. And I think the more that we find out, the more anxious I think we become. So thank you for sharing that. And this is do your poll everywhere, and it's a wonderful application to do if you have not used one of these before. So I have some links to reference that we're going through. And of course, this PowerPoint is typically shared out with all of you, so you'll have these links. But if you don't know about where to find the latest information, so the Iowa Department of Education, their COVID guidance and information page is located on these two links. And then every time that you go to there's on the lower left side, it says PK12, and that's where you'll want to click. And on that, you'll see every time there's a new something that comes out. So as you know, on June 25th, a few days before we had to submit our return to learn plans, they came out with some guidance and says, open up, everybody's welcome. And no masks are required, teach safety, but don't take any precautions like temperature checks or anything. And And so we were like, all right, I guess that's what we'll do. And then many school administrators then were contacting their local departments of health, and many are waiting until their board meeting, and then there's local control with your school boards. So I think Corey will probably talk to that a little bit more when my director of curriculum gets on the phone. So then, of course, July 1st, there was more announcements. And then July 9th, with early literacy implementation, it just keeps continuing to go. And so I look at this website pretty often so that I'm kind of in the know as things keep happening. But as you know, everything just keeps changing. So this is what this year is going to look like. Okay, so that is pretty much what this year is going to be like. We are going to have to, I believe, constantly pivot. And so that has become my word. And I don't take credit for coming up with the word, because my director of curriculum started using it when we were having our administration meetings and going through the components of Ready to Learn. And I thought, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So okay, so on to something a little more serious. So in the Return to Learn plans, if you had not seen them, there were these components, and this was laid out in like a 73-page document on all the different elements that school districts had to look at. And I'm just gonna take really quickly, I'm just gonna show you each of them, because I think it's important to look at them, because each of those components are what we then looked at my task force for the after school program and said, okay, these are the main things that we need to think about. So leadership and infrastructure, and then I also have links to every one of these, which has some additional resources and information there as well. So establish your committee and use the continuous improvement process. And that is why we're going to continue to pivot, because we're going to create it and change. But it's important to have some kind of leadership or task force. And that's what I took away from this, is really to have my key people to help and making some decisions about after school. And then also to think about communication and how I'm going to communicate out decisions and answer questions with staff and stakeholders. Then, of course, health and safety. And I'll just say this, and this is the only time I'll say it, is that it's sad that it's such a political issue. But I would hope that all of us, and I know many of you, I love this, where it says that our students, teachers, staff, and families are first and foremost what we want to think about with health and safety when we come back to school. And they even talked about having, if you have a hybrid model or an on-site, and what are the challenges that you'll be facing, and how can you plan for each one of those. And so we, on our task force, just thought about all of those different elements as we went into it. Excuse me. Then our Iowa academic standards. Now, we all know that that our kids are we're lacking that months of individual instruction, and every single district did a different online learning. So their continuous education looked very different, and so we have to keep that in mind as well. And if you're a site working with multiple districts and multiple buildings, there's such a variety of what happened. And then even from student to student, depending on who their teachers were, every teacher was kind of doing things differently as well. So there's really that lack of continuity that our students were receiving. And so it's a lot to think about in here. and some thoughts that I'll get into in a minute here. This is the part I think in after school is so important, is this social emotional. And again, they said that this was first and foremost, along with the physical health and safety, was the social emotional and behavioral health of our students. And just kind of food for thought with this, as well as our older kids go to their pediatricians or to their physicians for physicals and the immunizations. A lot are doing screenings as well in mental health. So my daughter is going into 7th grade, and she went back to get her immunizations, and they did the depression screening. And it was interesting they do that on their own, so I didn't look at it or anything. And I think coming from there, it would be really valuable if there was some kind of resource, because I think we would see quite a bit of this if we were to survey many of our students. And while we're very anxious, our kiddos are 10 times as anxious, whether they were neurotypical or non-neurotypical students. And we're hearing that across the board. And then we have our kiddos who have some level of special education, and how are we going to serve their needs in after school as well as school day, but how are we going to serve them in after school when maybe they needed more one-on-one, and they're your kids that need that attention, but yet we're going to be switching and going back and forth. And what if we're online? What do we do about providing equity and for all of these kids? And then the most important for grantees, data. And so this talks about surveying your community, to find out about their thoughts and feelings around COVID. So are they ready to go back to school? Do the parents not want them to come back to school? Are the students worried? Do the parents not want them, or do want them to wear masks? How taking a poll of your community, just like I took a poll of all of you, to see what you were thinking and feeling. So they wanted school districts to do that, but then that also made me think about, again, each one of these, I'm talking specific about how we tailor it to after school. And so that was also a driving factor of having a task force for me, so that I was kind of asking directly parents and community partners and students. So, but something else to really think about, especially as we thought about those other components that we just talked about, with special education and with the academic learning and the challenges there, is what are you going to be looking at for data? How do we measure our program effectiveness? I mean, we can't really look at attendance from one year to the next. We can't really look at office referrals one year to the next, behavior. We did teacher surveys, but they weren't a full year. And then we didn't have our state assessments. So, and last year was the first year of those state assessments. So even comparing last year to the previous year wasn't apples to oranges. And now we don't have data this year. So I just wanted to take a minute to just think about, when we're having these conversations with school districts about, what data can I pull from to show that we're having an impact on math and literacy with the students that we're serving. And so there's kind of two definitions and two forms of data, the summative and the formative. And so I wanted to just show you each of those real quick, because this is important as we're talking to directors of curriculum. So the summative assessments of learning and given at a certain point in time. So the Iowa State assessments, a certain point in time. And then our formative assessments, which help us to guide instruction based on what the child needs. And so I wanted to show you kind of examples of each of these. So summative would be like the ACT and SAT. They're taken at a point in time. Our state assessments, some ELL assessments. So they measure your students' achievements compared to a defined set of standards. Now our formative assessments, so non-graded quizzes, pre-tests that we're doing, progress monitoring, MTSS, learning logs, so things that our school district partners and their staff run all the time, and that helps them know, how do we increase our students' learning? How do we adjust instruction for individual students? How do we diagnose if there's an additional need that a student has, or how do we improve our instructional program? So those are things we can absolutely do in after school as well, with some pre-tests, and not make it look like school, but to gather at least some information about how the kids in each of our groups are doing, because our summative is going to be lacking from this school year. And of course, the Iowa Department of Ed, I wanted to share this with you. They do have a YouTube channel. And so anytime they do a webinar for their school administrators, it is available for everybody to see. So it's not live, so it's recorded and then placed on there later. But sometimes these might be beneficial for you to look at, especially as things continue to progress and an increase in things start changing and people start going back to school. So, so I wanted to make you aware that that there is a YouTube channel as well, to see what our school administrators are actually being informed by the Department of Ed. Okay. So now that we have all of that information and the 73-page document that I just did for you in a few minutes, this is kind of what it feels like.
Cassie.
Yep.
Hey, I'm sorry, your audio is barely, I mean, you can hear just a whisper, so.
Oh, okay. From me talking or from the video, or both?
From the video. Yeah,
okay.
The video.
I can fix that. Better? No? Okay. All right, well, if you want to view this later, it's giving instructions in the classroom. You can find it on YouTube. And basically, he tells everybody, okay, so here's what you're going to do next. You're going to take your piece of paper and I want you to write your name on it. And then I want you to put it on over in this pile if you have lunch in the morning. But if you have a assignment that's due, or you have a sports class, then I need you to put it over here and then move it to this hot lunch over there and then move it to over here. And so it's very complicated instructions. And then everybody's left going, okay, well, what if I'm in a sport, but I also want hot lunch? Then where am I supposed to put it? Am I supposed to put it in this pile or that pile? And that's kind of what it felt like. And the more instructions we get, the more complicated and more confused I think everybody gets. So I want to take you through what we did then based on all of this information in a way that really helped me piece it down and then be able to decide what to do. And it was important to me that I didn't, I mean, you know, all the grant directors, I mean, we can make these decisions and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. But I felt it was so important, especially after looking through the Return to Learn plan, that I don't want to make that decision unilaterally. And so I created this task force and we met once a week in order to get done what I'm going to show you. So I made sure that I had a few community partners that are very active in our program and lead programming, that I had some parents of some of our students, that I had staff from various buildings, that I had some administrators on the call, and that we received student input as well. And then from there, we wanted to look at all aspects and then listen to suggestions and how everybody was feeling about returning and about the various models that were being explained to us. And then know that we are, and this is for you to know, so Pieces, our after school program, is part of the school district. So we use the school buildings, the classrooms, we use school day staff. And so we know that we have to pivot with whatever is going on, with whatever the school decides, as soon as they make that decision. And whether that's on a Sunday and the Department of Ed says, move to hybrid, continuous education virtually, my school board says, no, we're going to do this, then I have to be ready for all of those things. So I created this template, and as you can see here, there's this is what I shared with all my task force members. And this is a blank one for you that Crystal's gonna send out, but it's also available on our Iowa 21 cclc.com website. I put it into the program support committee. So if you go to the committees and then look at support, it's there as well. So in here, I made it, and I made sure that there was an ongoing agenda, and that I added a new little agenda on that spreadsheet every time that we met every week. And then that we identified who the task force members were, what ideas that they had, objectives of our meeting, and then what our final plans were, and then any different curriculum ideas that people had, lesson plan ideas. So I'm going to take you through this here. Okay, so some of the thoughts and ideas, that were bouncing around was, okay, so if we are back at school and we want to lead some kind of group activity, will we put masking tape on the ground to denote 6 foot apart? And that's where the kiddos have to stand in these like squares if we lead an activity. How do we disinfect materials that we would be using for later? Can you use crayons, or how do you disinfect the crayons between everybody? What were our parents and students thinking about? They're feeling anxious or fearful, there's concern. And then our in-person guidelines. So how do we keep our kids together but minimize exposure to other children and staff? How do we monitor the flow of students in and out? How do we do snack? How do we do recess? Should the students have identified little pencil boxes and that's what they use all the time? What if we're doing an activity and there's a ball or there's a game pass? Then how do they not share it between other groups so that we can limit contact tracing? And this is staff and students, to keep in mind, because if a staff member it has a ball and they toss it to somebody else, then, they're touching it, somebody else is touching it. And then, so it's really for everybody. So do we not share, or do we just share a ball within that group that staff member is assigned to? And then how do we limit the amount of people that they run into, so that if someone did have a family member and then they tested positive for COVID and we needed to identify and contact a certain group, could we do that and then have just that classroom, just that group of students not come for 2 weeks, but the whole rest of your after school program continues? Or do you have to cancel that because everybody was interacting so much that now that site is shut down? So things that we wanted to really think about. Greetings. How do we greet our kids when they want to hug? How do we, can we laminate everything that we would use so that it's easy to clean with Clorox? And then what are our daily activities in after school, from how we greet the kids at the door, our job board, if you have a safe space or a calm down area, how do we do parent check-in and dismissals? All of these things, and talk about each one of these activities so that we can have an alternate plan to keep everybody safe. So then we decided about 4 models. And so, because came out of our task force conversation. So we have an A-B rotation. So if since we're going into the school buildings, and we'll do after school so I've got 7 sites. So if I go into, I'm going to say Grimes Elementary, and Grimes is doing an A-B rotation. And these kids, is it by classroom? Is it by households? Like, how is that being done as well within your building and the school district's decisions? Because maybe they're going to have households that are on the same A-B rotation, or is it going to be grades? So in one building, kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 4th grade are all meeting on A days, and then and the opposites are meeting on the B days. So if they're doing social distancing and doing an A-B rotation, then all of the classrooms would have to be used, because now you're limiting the number of kids in each classroom. So a classroom that was for 26 kids now is a classroom for 11 or 10. And so if the school district is doing that, then okay, so then how am I going to run program if it is kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 4th grade? How am I going to run program at that site if it's by household? So now I've got a variety of kids from different grades. Can the school allow me to be in that classroom immediately after school dismissal, or do they have to have a cleaning process before I come into that building? And so is there going to be time between when I come into the building and run after school and put them in a classroom till when till when they're doing dismissal? And how are they doing dismissal if they can't be in common areas like the cafeteria or the gym when they do dismissals? Then I've got to think about those processes too. Okay, so A-B rotation. So lots to think about. And then, do we run program for only those kids that are there on those days? Do we duplicate lessons? And what happens to those kids who aren't in school? And after school as well, if they're not in school that day, then what happens to them about your after school enrollment? Okay, so then if we go to all virtual, all right, so if we move to all virtual, do we want a virtual after school option? If we do, when do we conduct those things? How often do we specialize? Do I have specific staff that specializes in that? Do I have to find them? I'm throwing a lot at you. Crystal, you just raise your hand because I don't have chat open if I need to stop or if there's anything that I need to address.
Yeah, no, we're absolutely fine, Cassie. I do want to take just a quick minute to mention that the Iowa After School Alliance has come up with a graphic that is hopefully visualizing exactly what Cassie is saying here, and talking about how you situate kids in classrooms to out of school or after school or before school activities as well. But I'll be happy to send that graphic out when we send out the information from today's meeting as well. So
thank you. Okay, and this I'm going to show you this broken down in a minute here. So then if there's a hybrid model where most kids are at school and staff, but then those in high risk or the families who choose to do online school aren't there. So do we want an option for the hybrid model as well? Or what if only those who need one-on-one and more interventions are at school, but everybody else is at home? What happens in those situations? And do we even have enough staff to cover both a virtual and an in-person? And then, of course, our normal programming, where we're back, everybody's healthy, everybody's things fine. And then how do we pivot and pivot and pivot between all of these 2, 3, 4 options? Okay, so this is what it looked like. So I really narrowed this down. So I kept all of those things handy with me and in my mind, because I was also sitting on the Return to Learn committee at the school district level. So thinking about all of those things, I'm just making sure that my Corey. No, Corey's not there yet. Okay. So
Yes,
these were, oh, hi, Corey. I don't have to text you then. So, so then when, this is what my task force sheet looked like when I met with all of my, my stakeholders. So I asked these specific questions, and then I had all of the scenarios that we selected as a task force that we would be thinking about. And then I just typed. So I let them all talk about whatever they wanted to talk about in each, but we went through question by question. And then I just typed everything and we went to each different scenario. And so a little bit bigger. So first was, how do we do it? So I just asked the task force, how do we do this hybrid AB? So I took them through each one. How often do we meet? What are health and safety for our staff? What were they thinking? What did they want? What did they need? Then what about our students? What do they need? What do they want? And having the parents on the call, as well as community partners and everyone, it was a wonderful way to get feedback. And then transportation. Okay, so what is going to happen with transportation? How are buses, if you do bus children to your program, if you bus them home from the program, whatever transportation may look like for you and your after school program, what is going to come of that? So are they going to have to do social distancing on buses? If they do social distancing on buses, is it going to be every other seat and then it's at half the capacity or a quarter of the capacity that normally was? And how does that affect you offering transportation to get the kids to your program or to get home from your program? What would that look like? And if we didn't offer transportation home, how would that affect your program? We currently in Pieces, we do offer transportation home for students. So as long as they're eligible for school day transportation to and from school, then we offer it home to them. But if our school buses are having to go through quite a lot of cleaning, and then they have double trips or triple trips, am I going to even be able to offer transportation home using school facilities? And then the communication. So during this is great. This is the one thing that I had the most answers for, because you know, over from March till the end of the school year, we were communicating with your, you know, your staff, your stakeholders, your community partners, your parents. And so I could ask, what worked for you? What did we do or not do that was enough to inform you? Because everybody's communication style is different. I really needed to know, how do we communicate with you when there's all these changes? If it changes on a day or a night, how do I communicate with all my stakeholders? Okay, and then restrictions to activities. What activities do we need to rethink? What lesson plans do we need to rethink? Should we have multiple curriculum plans for the year? We kind of, in the summer, we always lay out the lesson plans and curriculum subjects for in our clubs for the year, or at least for half the year. So what isn't going to work now in each of these models? Or what do we just want to take out and replace so that we can pivot? And then does online look different then? So all of those kinds of questions. And then it was time for challenges. Let me hear it. What challenges do you think the parents will face? What challenges do you think our students will face? And then the challenges for our staff. What will you face? What are you feeling? And then I wanted them to just brainstorm, tell me everything. And I just typed away. And then what equipment did they need? Did they need additional equipment to do what they were doing? Did we need, you know, temperature? Do we need thermometers? Do we need more professional development? Can we, all of those kinds of things. And then the classrooms in the room space, because if you do use school district buildings, or even if you use any building that's not your own, having those really, as much as you can, have a very direct conversation about, you know, please tell me as much as you know so that I can prepare. And I'll know that it will change, and it will always change, and you may not know anything, but how can I prepare after school? At least have some plans in place. And so having those conversations is key, especially after I've spent 40 minutes with you telling you all these different precautions and things to think through. Really having those conversations with anybody you rent space from or you use space that isn't yours. And then your enrollment of students. How are you going to enroll students? Do you usually use paper to enroll students? Do you usually use, you know, conference nights or back to school nights or school and enrollment? How do you do that? And now do I have to do it differently? So for pieces we use Easy Reports software system to record and collect all of our information for our Pieces After School program, and they have an enrollment, an online enrollment process within Easy Reports. So I was able to move. We actually last year we did online enrollment for everybody, and so at least we had 1 year under us before this hit. Crystal, did you have something? Nope. Okay. And so you really need to be thinking about how you're going to enroll kids and enroll them throughout the year and communicate with anybody as they come in, because I don't think paper is gonna be the way to do it this year. And then your number of students, do you have to change that based on all of these criteria and all of these things? If you only have so many classrooms and there's social distancing in a classroom, do you have to limit the number of kids that you enroll? Do you have to limit it for transportation? Do you have to limit it for staffing? I mean, there's a lot here that we really had to think about. And so yes, my whole worksheet, all these questions, everything is in what's available and what I'm going to be sharing with you all, a whole blank template of this. All right, so then the next thought was, now that I had all the data and what everybody was thinking was, how do we pivot then? So do I have to change any of the way we do lessons? We use, for Pieces, we use MindWorks, academic enrichments, plus oh my gosh, I can't even think of it. Plus they're free. They have like 50 activities and they're just random. So they're not tied to the academic units. We also use STEMfinity kits. We have clubs like Lego clubs and drama clubs and chess clubs, and then we use Skilltastics stuff. So we use a lot of different stuff. What could we still use and what could we maybe not? If we have a pre-existing thing, but they all share the supplies, am I still going to be able to do it that way? If anything is porous, I'm not going to be able to use it because I can't clean it properly. No rugs, no carpet time, no soft furniture. I can't sanitize those correctly. So I'm going to show you kind of MindWorks and STEMfinity, and I'm sure many others, but these two do have some virtual kits that are available for purchase, that are set for Zoom and for Google Meets and for virtual activities. And you buy it and then they send you in boxes for each of your students, or supplies to put in the boxes for each of your students with the virtual lesson plans. And then during meal pickup, or maybe you just have a student pick up one day, they can pick up the boxes, take them home, and then every week the lesson plans are done virtually and the kids have all the supplies that they need. And then for clubs, a lot of our every community partner I've talked to are doing virtual activities, and all of them said, oh, I can do virtual activities with you if you want to offer virtual activities with us for your after school program in the coming year. So MindWorks has these essential kits, and then they have a STEAM kit. These essential kits have 12 math lessons, 12 math, 12 science, 12 language arts. So it's 36 different lessons. And if you did one lesson a week for your after school kids virtually, and you just checked in each day or every other day with them, I mean, you pretty much have most of the school year just with these. And so it's 36 hours of programming, and they have kits for you. And the prices, check with them because it keeps changing and lowering, and then they offer bundles and sales. and they have PDF lessons for you. Then they have project kits, which are for more of your older kids, and you can receive art supplies, and they have 6 comprehensive art lessons, each designed to be completed the course of a week, which we found week-long activity, so that there's not something every day, doesn't overwhelm our students and our families. So, but then we would still be able to offer something that's academic enrichment and still a way to connect with our kids. And then STEMfinity, oh, sorry. I thought I turned off all my things, but apparently I didn't turn off my watch. So STEMfinity has some virtual tools as well, some VR, and they have them with zoom in, manipulate models, all kinds of things that are remote and learn remote activity kits. So you can check those out too. So what did we decide to do? So here's what we decided that we're going to do. So we are, if there is, and we made 4 different scenarios. So if we have to do kind of an A-B with half the kids there each day, then we would do the same lesson both days. So we have a kind of a K1 breakout, but more like a K2 and then a 3-5 lesson specific. And so regardless of who, we still would have that, but our staff would teach the same lesson 2 days in a row. So we basically do 2 lessons a week versus kind of 4 or 5 lessons a week. And then we would offer a virtual option as well, weekly.
Kathy,
Yep.
I'm sorry, there is a question. The question is when you said you provide 36 hours, does that mean a week, or what is the parameter for that?
So, that's in this MindWorks virtual kits that they have for offer. So if you were to purchase the MindWorks Essential Kit, what it comes with is 36 different lessons. So not what I do, but that's what they have. Okay, so we have our A/B and how that's going to run, and then we're going to have an all virtual. So if we do all virtual, then we'll have a weekly. So the lesson will last for the week. Parents can pick up the supplies. We'll have a box or a bag of supplies that they'll need for the week, or maybe we'll do the supplies for a month. And then the parents can pick that up at the child's school site. Or if that's not available because of COVID restrictions, then where we're doing our food pickups, then we'll have them available there, and it'll be in a drive-through format. So I'll have staff with masks, and they'll hand out those to the kiddos. And then if it's some kind of hybrid model where not all kids are at school, not the AB, where they are going to be at school every other day, but it's something else, then we will do the weekly virtual, just like we would do the all virtual. And then we would have some in person. So for instance, if like the kids that are at school have special education or special needs, and those are the kids at school, we'll do some kind of after school for them there, and then everybody else virtual. Or if it's opposite, then we would do that. And then of course, normal. We all know what to do if things are normal. And then we're ready to pivot. No matter what happens, we'll be ready. And so this summer we are doing these four calendars. And so we're ready to go. So we're contacting everybody we can about the community partners who can do something virtual to kind of offset what we're able to do. And then we're looking at staff that is really comfortable with a virtual format, and then those that are not. And then we're going to be talking to all staff later this month. And then right now I have a 4-day in-person, August 10, 11, 12, and 13 for all my pieces staff. Or I'll do that virtually, in which we're going to talk through the different scenarios and teach them different virtual activities and how to do Google Classroom. And we're going to make a Google Classroom for every single after school class. So we're going to use, so the kids have been doing it, they're familiar with it. They all have one-on-one technology from our school district. And so we're just going to make Google Classrooms for after school and then assign teachers to those Google Classrooms.
Cassie, we have another question.
Yeah.
The question is when the students are doing the A-B rotation, will you do the all day or stay with the after school time? And I'm not entirely sure if I understand that question.
I think I get it. Yeah. So, so for us, so Pieces is going to do after school only still. The district, and Corey is on and can talk to this as well. So the district is looking at different partners to offer childcare for as many as they can do on those opposite days, so that kind of that kindergarten through 5th have a place to go on those days. So like your YMCA and different church groups who can offer and it's really nice if you can find someone that is also DHS licensed, so that they can serve kind of all of our kiddos. All of us that are 21st century grantees have high poverty and a high free and reduced lunch rate students that we see. So what happens, how can a parent work, their kids home? We all know that there's no perfect answer here. There's no great scenario regardless. And whatever decisions we make, we're not going to please everybody. All we can do is the best we can, taking into consideration the health and safety and social emotional well-being of our staff and our students and our parents. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to concentrate on the after school portion, so that when kids are at school, we're offering after school for them. And that's just the capacity that we're able to do, especially because I'm school based. And so I can't use school buildings for after school, or for, if it's all virtual, if schools are mandated to be closed. I hope that answers your question. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Corey now so you can hear the school side of things.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Corey Johnson. I'm the Director of Curriculum with the Burlington Community School District. So happy to be with you today. And Cassie, and after talking with Crystal, asked me just to kind of tag in here a little bit on district perspective. Cassie's done a really nice job of kind of laying out, I think, what are the options that we're considering as a district here in Burlington, and I think they're very similar to what a lot of your districts are considering as well. You'll notice some difference sometimes based on the size of the school, based on the community factors, but I'm going to try to talk through kind of what we're kind of some of the things that are going through our minds, and things for you to consider as you work with your partner districts. I understand and recognize that we're in a little bit of a unique setting, or more unique, because Pieces is a part of our district, and Cassie and all of the other Pieces staff are district employees, and we have the grant as a district, so it allows us to be very coordinated in what we do. So just as you know, as we talk through this, think about your local district or local districts that you're partnered with, and whether or not you've had the opportunity to have these conversations with them. So Cassie, next slide. So when you think about return to learn and return to school, the Iowa Department of Education has been very clear and distinct in these two conversations. Return to learn is one set of guidance, and return to school is another set of guidance. So return to learn is, the understanding that Iowa schools have to be prepared to have kids engaged in learning, whether that be on-site or online. And within our return to learn plans, we've developed those plans around these conceptual areas of leadership, infrastructure, health and safety, Iowa academic standards, social emotional behavioral health, equity, and data. And those were the planning considerations that were set out by the Iowa Department of Education. All of those resources are on a DE website, an Iowa Department of Ed Return to Learn website. And again, as a community partner, if you haven't seen that yet, it's a good place to go and just kind of get a sense of what districts are being asked to do and what resources we're being provided. And I just dropped the link to that site in the chat window. So that's, the return to learn plans are written around those conceptual areas. The reopening guidance or this return to school guidance is a separate set of guidance that was issued just a few weeks ago and caused a lot of controversy statewide. And the Department of Education's more, I'll say global, but some people say vague approach to reopening guidance. And pushing a lot of decisions down to the local level in terms of when is it safe, when is it not safe, to what degree is it safe to reopen your buildings and have on-site programming. So school reopening guidance is really about the physical reopening of the school building and when it's safe and to what capacity you can have your school buildings open, whereas the return to learn guidance is really about how do you develop and build academic programs regardless of whether it's on-site or virtual or a hybrid. In the Burlington School District, we're going to be in a larger district. And I know many of you also work with larger districts. We've broken the work into work teams. So we have our teacher leaders and curriculum leads really working on the academic standards and the academic program pieces. Our counselors and social workers are really working on the social emotional pieces. Our nurses on the health and safety pieces. Maintenance on health and safety and mitigation strategies. Our administrators have been meeting frequently. We include our association and union representatives in some of those conversations when appropriate. Obviously, Cassie already talked to you about the pieces work team that she had put together, but that would fall under this as well. If you work with a smaller district, you may not have this many work teams playing out. It may be I think with a lot of our smaller districts, they have a core planning team that's just that they're working through all of this as a core team for that smaller district. So that's one thing to look into with your district is who's responsible, who's taking the lead. Is the superintendent the lead planning person? Is it somebody one of the other central office administrators? Who's your point of contact for this return to learn information, and understanding that, again, depending on the size of your district, that may look different. Okay, slide, there we go. So when we talk about health and hygiene in the school setting, again, these are some things that we are doing, or at least that we're considering doing, and this has evolved since Cassie and I since I sent Cassie this slide, but we look at specific plans and procedures for each site. So in our district, we have 7 school buildings, 4 elementaries, an intermediate, a middle, and a high, and that looks different. This looks different based on the building. So our high school that has over 1,000 kids in it versus our elementary buildings that have 300 to 400 kids in them. The specific plans and procedures are going to look different. So when we think about school entry, when we think about when students arrive in the morning, spreading those entrances, if they used to come in one main door and I'm thinking about our elementaries or even our high school, they come in one main entrance, they gather in the cafeteria or gym and wait for that first bell to ring as they're dropped off, as the buses come. That can't happen this year. So we have to be ready for students to arrive at the building, come quickly in through an entrance, and be able to go straight to their classroom space. So kind of this idea of holding students in the cafeteria or in the commons. So the same thing then plays out after school, and Cassie and I have talked about this as well. Traditionally in our after school programs, kids have generally as the bell rings, they go wait in a designated space. So they're going to a mass gathering location, whether it be the cafeteria, the auditorium, one of the commons areas, to wait for pieces to start. And wait, and to get ready to do their snack and everything else. That's going to have to look different this year. We're not going to be able to do that. We also then need to think about the cleaning piece. So if they're using a program space that's just been used during the day, does that program space need to be cleaned and disinfected before then the kids can go back into that space? And that's working very closely with your school maintenance staff. Do they understand that this, these 3 or 4 rooms need to get turned around and cleaned very quickly? And I don't know how many of you use district space for your programming versus they come on site, they come onto your site, but things to keep in mind. Food service regulations and water fountain regulations. Right now, water fountains can't be turned on, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So, do we have water bottles? Do we have water bottle filling stations? If you provide snack in your after school program, which I'm assuming you do, what are the regulations there? Can we have students eating together? We've gotten some guidance from our public health that students can use the cafeteria, but they have to sit on one side of the table and they have to be sat 6 feet apart from each other. So you think about what that does to the capacity of a cafeteria. So again, what's that look like for your snack time in the after school program? We've right now in our summer program, and we are running summer school. We have hybrid options. We have some face-to-face options. Our biggest face-to-face program is our elementary. And if you caught the news, the Burlington face-to-face program is currently pivoted to a hybrid program because we had 8 kids with high temperatures because we were temperature screening in our summer program. 8 kids with high temperatures in a 50-kid summer program kind of raised some alarms, and we had public health involved right away. It is good to report that of all the kids that have been tested, none of them have been positive for COVID. But that's another good example of we've shut down an entire program for what has so far turned out to be no positive tests. So again, that's not good, bad, or indifferent. That's just kind of the reality of where we're working. And I think that's something to be prepared for as you roll in. Another thing to be prepared for is, as Cassie talked through those options, is that we have to be prepared that that's another good example of where we have to shift overnight. So you may get a call, your school district may make a call one evening that the next, starting tomorrow, we're shifting to required continuous learning for the next 2 weeks. And you have literally that much notice, as do parents and as do kids and everybody else. So, that's just part of the unfortunate reality we have to be ready for, is being prepared to pivot. So again, these are just, an example of some of the health and safety considerations that we're either currently making or considering. Obviously, masks versus no masks, versus masks versus, if we think about face coverings versus PPE, that's a conversation right now as well. A face covering provides a certain level of protection for yourself and for others. Full personal protective equipment provides a different level, and there's a different standard for that. So if you're going to be thinking about masks, are you thinking about cloth reusable masks? Are you thinking about surgical masks? Are you thinking about eye protection along with those masks? What's your level of PPE and the level of conversation that you're having? So that's a conversation, again, to have with your district as well. So when your school district says mask, what's that really mean? And how are they defining that? And they may not be able to answer that yet, but again, these are the things that are kind of going through our head right now. Slide, there we go. So Cassie already talked through these considerations. I think, we're, as a district, we're trying to, figure out when do we need to be, I think that most of us in education understand the importance of kids being on site as much as possible. But it's kids on site as much as possible in a way that's safe. So what we're all trying to determine right now is, well, what is safe? And that's the $1 million question that, I don't have an answer to. And that's what we're spending, a lot of time trying to determine, and unfortunately there's a lot of disagreement in the world around that topic. And I think that as you're probably in the positions that you're in, going to very quickly, are understanding, no matter what we do, there's going to be a chunk of our parents and community that are upset about those decisions that we make. So we're going to be in some ways in win-win situations, in other ways we're going to be in lose-lose situations when it comes to the beliefs and the mindsets and the perspectives of our community. I think Cassie talked through all those spaces. So that's where we really come into this considerations around, you know, what are our legal considerations, what are our staff considerations, and what are our student considerations. And that's really where we're living as a district, and I'm sure many of your districts are living right now too, is, you know, there are things that we legally can do and there are things that we legally have to do. There are decisions that we have to make that are in the best interest of our staff and our staff safety. And there are decisions we have to make that are in the best interest of student safety and student learning. So as we kind of work through this process, we're trying to find that place where legal and best for staff and best for students all overlap, or mostly overlap, in a way that will create a learning environment that's safe and open, that's as safe and as open as it can be. One of the things that's important to consider, that's important to remember when we talk about those mitigation strategies that I discussed a minute ago, and when we think about these legal and staff and student considerations, is mitigation strategies are just that. They're meant to mitigate the likelihood of spread. They are not meant to, nor can they eliminate spread. I anticipate that at some point during the school year, every district in Iowa will have cases of COVID-19. This point, I mean, that just is going to happen. The question becomes how, you know, when those cases occur, it's not if they occur, it's when they occur. How do we, you know, how are we minimizing the likelihood of spread? How are we minimizing the likelihood of spread to a large number of people? So when we talk about cohorting, and I know Crystal earlier mentioned the Iowa After School Alliance graphic that they sent out last week. That's one of the ones that I caught that right away, and I've stolen it for the board presentation tonight, Crystal. So thank you. It's in my board presentation for tonight. You know, there's a cost benefit analysis to everything, and that's really what we're trying to work through right now, is what's the cost benefit for each of these decisions. So when we think about, you know, A day, B day, sounds really great on paper. You know, we're able to maintain 6-foot social distance. When a kid's in the room, they're only in a room with maybe 10 to 12 other kids. So they're limiting the amount of spread that they have. But then the question becomes, where are they on the B day? So if we have 10 kids in a classroom that go 10 different places on their B day, on their required continuous learning day, it mixed with another group of kids, and then they come back to school the following day, you know, we've really broken this idea of cohorting. So, you know, again, it's not that we should or shouldn't do one or the other, but it's that we really have to think about and work with our public health agencies and look at the level of community spread that's happening, look at where our kids are going. If you're in and again, especially thinking about, I think either Crystal or Cassie said this a few minutes ago, but by nature of having these grants, we are in higher poverty areas. We are in higher adversity areas. So what is the availability of childcare? When kids aren't at school, who are they with? When kids aren't at school, what do they have access to? When we talk about required continuous learning, what's our true capacity for online access for these students? What's our true capacity for meal service to students? What's our true capacity to social emotional services and nursing services for students? So again, these are all part of the cost benefits that we have to weigh, and it may look different for those of us on this webinar than it does for, you know, a district in Iowa that has a much lower percent of free and reduced students, or a smaller school district in Iowa. So, you know, there's a lot of context and a lot of weighing of pros and cons that's going to take place. Cassie, I think that was my last slide, wasn't it? Okay. So again, that's just meant to be, you know, again, my goal was just to kind of give you a sense of your, you know, what are the considerations that we're trying to work in through the school. And again, if you know, I would really encourage you to, if you haven't already, make close and make frequent contact with whoever your district liaison is. If you don't have a seat on the planning team, get a seat on the planning team. If your districts are hesitant to do that, tell them to call me. You guys play a big role in this, and you provide great services for the districts that you're working with. And regardless of, we all kind of have to be in this together, and more heads in the room as we go into the fall. And at the end of the day, be ready to pivot, because I think it's important to understand that no matter where your school district starts in August, what plan it starts with, that plan will change. It will change multiple times through the course of the year. And we have to be ready to pivot on very short notice as a student becomes ill, as multiple students become ill, as staff become ill, as community spread increases or decreases. Your school districts will be making very, very quick decisions around pivots. I will stop talking.
Thank you, Corey. It's just so valuable to be able to have different voices on the call, and I'm in a very fortunate position where I work so closely with I'm a school district employee, so I get to work with Corey all the time, and he's just so supportive of the work that we do in after school. So it was great to have a little bit of his time today. So as I wrap up here, what we want, what we have, all we can do is deal with what we're given at the moment, and then be ready for whatever the future should bring us. So, questions. We covered a lot of different things, and I know from our poll you were all feeling anxious before. I'm sure we really didn't eliminate that, but at least I'm hoping that we gave you some kind of guide and guidance, and as to, okay, so how do I wrap my head around it, and what questions do I ask and what do I do?
All right. So first and foremost, Cassie and Corey, thank you so much for providing this presentation today. This has been a lot of information, but it's been very good and very valuable information. So I think the group would probably agree with me that we have a lot of work to do, but at least now we have a roadmap of how to get there. I did drop that graphic into the chat box, and Corey, of course, included the website link to the Return to Learn home. So please check that out if you care to do so. We do have a question regarding, has anybody heard from DHS being able to use CCA money for the non-school in-person days? So if anybody has information about that, great. And then also feel free to unmute yourself or to use the chat if you have a question for Cassie or Corey. The other thing I would say is if you are like me, you sometimes need a little time to process. So if that's the case, you can certainly ask questions at any time. I'm happy to be the conduit to Cassie and Corey for that information, or their information is, Cassie just dropped her information into the box there, the chat box, so please take note of that. And I would say, and Corey's got his email in there, so thank you very much. And it sounds like if there's no questions, we'll give you guys the gift of 15 minutes of free time now. So,
Thank you all. It was a pleasure. And remember, look at YouTube. You can have some levity in your day and get ready to pivot.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.